Well, come on. Come on in the room. I'm glad you're here. You are in the principal's office. Don't be scared. I know it can be challenging, but you're here today to join me as my guest as we'll examine for the next 30 minutes the bottom of every issue related to education that we face. And today I'm excited that you're with me because we're going to talk about all the issues and the topics in education that affect our Black children and our community the most. I'm excited because our discussion will always be honest and will always be solution focused. This is where our guests come to explain themselves and their ways of thinking and educating our community around the issues that matter to us most. I'm your host, Michelle Pennix, and I am glad you are here, otherwise known as Principal Pennix. And today I'm excited because we have a wonderful show planned. Today we are going to focus on virtual learning at home. How to start a virtual learning hub in your very own house. So to get started today, we want to focus on a couple of issues that are prevalent in our community, and let's talk about why we would even have a discussion about virtual learning hubs in the home. First and foremost, we know that we're in the middle of COVID-19. As a result of this economic and societal pandemic, we know that schools have shut down all across the country. All major cities have, for the most part, made a decision to keep schools closed until there is a vaccine for this horrible pandemic. As such, parents have to make a decision about what is best for them and for their child. COVID-19 is one of the main reasons we'll talk about starting a virtual hub in your home, but it also is an area that we need to discuss in terms of risk. Because anytime you are working with your children or children that you'll invite into your home in a virtual hub, you'll need to consider the risks that come along with COVID-19 as well. We do know that children can contract COVID-19, and as such, it is a risk, but again, it is a risk that is far less of a bad thing when you are educating children in your own home in small numbers as opposed to sending them to a public school on a daily basis. Another reason why we're talking about virtual learning hubs in the home today and on today's show is because of the financial conditions many families find themselves in during this time. Not everyone is able to go outside the home and work, and for those that do work, and raising a family and educating one at the same time can be very difficult to do. And so we want to make sure that you have that to consider as you decide whether or not your child needs to be participating in a virtual learning hub out of your own home. So when we talk about the financial considerations, when we talk about the COVID considerations, we also have to remember why this is an important topic now is because of the academic conditions as well. It's important that you recognize your child's academic performance while they are in school as opposed to out of school. And some of that may even cross over into behavioral expectations while they're at school and while they're at home and considerations. I say that, I know for a fact that after we've been several weeks into the school year already, there are a lot of parents who haven't received a phone call yet from a teacher to say, we had a little issue with your child today. So for that reason, there's a great contrast between the regular school year and what it would look like educating your child in your own home. And today we want to talk about that. So we've talked about the academic, the behavioral considerations for opening and starting your own virtual learning hub in your home. We've talked about COVID-19. We've talked about the financial reasons. We also want to talk about this season of racial unrest, racial revolution in our city and in our country. As we continue to grapple with the racism that has existed in our country for over 401 years and the ramifications of it, we know that children need to have that explained to them as well. There needs to be time for family discussions, and that needs to relate to all aspects of our lives. And there's no better place to do that than in your home. So we challenge you to be thinking about that. We challenge you to be thinking about all of those considerations and whether or not this should be the time that you consider opening up a virtual learning hub in your very own home. Finally, with all of those considerations, we know that our state governments have marked out a timeline for when schools may go back. In the state of Kentucky, it's a color-coded system, and those color codes express when it's safe and when it's not. In our own county of Jefferson County, Kentucky, we know that our superintendent and board members have said that once we're in the yellow for several weeks, it'll be okay to go back. And as of now, we are not in the yellow, we're still in orange, so we expect that with COVID-19, there may not be a time for students go back until after the end of the year and maybe even into 2021. So the question is, with all of those considerations, where do you stand? What do you want for your child and your family, your community, in terms of their academic, educational expectations, presentation of new learning, their academic behavioral needs? What does that look like? And is a virtual hub the right answer for you? So as you can see, we are only at the beginning. I want you to stay tuned. When we come back from this break, we'll break it all down piece by piece, how you can start today your very own virtual learning hub in your home. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the principal's office. Today we are talking about opening a virtual learning hub in your home. Right before our break, we discussed some of the reasons why you would even be considering such a thing at a time and a season such as this. And we discussed COVID-19 and its implications, as well as some of the risk factors with doing that in your home now. But we also talked about the academic need. We talked about the racial unrest and the conversations that can really only happen for many of our Black children inside of our homes, the safety and the comfort that that provides. And we talked about the financial considerations for many families where this is a real option and a real need. And so today we're going to jump into some of the specifics about how to start a virtual learning hub in your home. To that end, we want you to recognize that one of the first things that you'll need to do in starting a virtual hub in your home is to know your how and your why. When we talk about know your why, it starts with your philosophy of education. And so even though you are not a teacher or a principal or an education major even, everyone has some deep-seated beliefs about how they think children learn best. You know that because all of you've had an experience of being a child in a classroom. You know what worked for you and maybe you know what didn't work for you. And so in thinking back on those experiences and maybe the experiences of your children when they were in-person schooling, maybe there were some things that came across your mind that really helped you narrow in what your philosophy was. Not only that, but we want you to think about the curriculum choices that you're going to make for your student. What would be best? What do they need to learn and why is that important during this time? Because there are a lot of considerations when you're starting a virtual learning hub. Let's start with the philosophy again in thinking what it is that you believe about education. Many people today have heard of the unschooling or micro school movements. It's a movement that really allows you to learn from your environment and learn from the people around you. At the same time, many people are using the public school education curriculum. We know that that is one that is most likely Common Core, like it is in the state of Kentucky, based on a set of state standards. Many families are comfortable in knowing that, but many families want to supplement or bring into their child's education other pieces of curriculum that really affect and lend to their family's philosophy. Currently, many families are surprised by the things they did not know maybe about Black history that they've learned over the course of the past 3 months. And as such, maybe that's a part that you'd want to include. Maybe you have real thoughts about how children should be educated. Do they have to sit at a desk during the day? Do they get a chance to walk around and to learn? Are they visual learners? Are you hoping that kids never sit for more than a half an hour and get to take a break? What is important about how long they spend in front of the computer or how long they spend in front of a teacher, you as the parent learning their lessons? When is it best for them to start? When is it best for them to end? Those are all considerations that go into informing your decision about the philosophy of education that you want for your own hub. I've said before and I'll say again, I believe that any parent who has a desire to do so can do so. And we want to encourage you to do just that. If you have a desire to make sure that your child is safe and your child is educated in a safe environment, then this should be a consideration for you, especially during this season. And it's a lot more than just considering my child's on NTI, non-traditional instruction, or sitting and learning the virtual school curriculum of the public school in your city. Instead, it's about bringing other students into your home as well. So the first step is knowing the philosophy, what you believe, why you believe that, and any evidence that you might have to support it. And I say that because there are a lot of things that are happening and being talked about in the field of education that many people believe and support and other people don't. I know that in many times when I've seen hubs and they've been started around the country during this time, you see pictures of parents sitting around the table, educating groups of students. But sometimes you see parents standing up and students sitting at desks in a family room or in a location in their home that looks like a school. So those are just thoughts that you have to consider whenever you are thinking about educating your children and other people's children in your home. Do your research. When we talk about curriculum, will you use the public school curriculum? We know that that's free, and free is important, but we also know that iHomeschool Network will teach you how to use your environment without having to pay a dime to educate your child. There are lots of curriculums on the market. Khan Academy, Kids Academy from Khan App, Critical Thinking Company. Kamali Academy is one that offers a Pan-African background for many students in terms of learning all the content. Moving Beyond the Page is another curriculum that is very popular with parents who choose to educate their students in the home. So whenever you are starting a virtual hub, the first thing you want to consider is your philosophy. How do you believe that students learn best? What that looks like, why you believe that, evidence that maybe supports it, and then do some research about what you will actually make sure your child and the children that you help to educate in your home actually have access to. And so the terms homeschool and virtual school a lot of times will sound a lot alike. I think for most people, when we talk about virtual learning hubs, we do talk about using the public school curriculum, but we also talk about maybe supplementing that with other curriculum throughout the day. So step one, know what you believe and why. Why are you even doing this? And making sure that you research and do your work about the curriculum you want to use, or maybe even how you want to supplement that curriculum. Next question for consideration, the who and the when. And this is the part that I enjoy talking about most of all, because we're going to be talking about what other families to get involved and what other times to have your actual virtual learning hub. One of the things that we know is that virtual learning hubs involve small groups of people, small groups of kids coming together, again, in the best interest of those students. One of the things that we know right now during this time is that the picture of one child and one parent sitting down at a desk doing virtual education is not the reality of most families. Instead, we're talking about families with 2 or 3 or 4 or more school-age children. We're talking about different parents being able to work with the child at a time. So we encourage you to, one, identify another family or families with 1 or 2 children who would like to go into this venture with you, a virtual learning hub. And again, that most directly points to the financial considerations. Maybe there's a parent that you know that works during the day 2 days a week and has 3 days a week available. Maybe there's someone who you know who works a second or a third shift and is available most days during the day. In either case, you want to identify like-minded parents who also believe that same philosophy that you did. And in just a minute, we're going to talk about values even more than philosophy, because that's super important. But once you identify those other families or family that has the same philosophy and availability to make a virtual learning hub work, then you're going to make sure that, one, you're limiting yourself to anybody's home to less than 5 children. And I say that to be COVID safe, but I also say that because the reality is working with more than 5 children with one adult at any one time is more than a notion. We would think that public school educators have taught us over the years by their demands for smaller class size why this is a necessity. 5 children, 1 adult is a maximum for trying to operate a virtual learning hub in anyone's home. So we got to consider what families are we going to work with. Also, what ages and grades are we going to work with? And here's something very important. Are all of the children involved independent learners? Now, I say that because if you can imagine people coming together, a cousin and a friend maybe coming together to create the hub, and there's 5 children all together, and one of those children maybe has ADHD and constantly needs to be encouraged and redirected to participate in lessons. That can be very difficult for a member of the hub who isn't used to that student. So while that can be a conversation, it's also important that we think that you want the majority of the students to be independent learners. So discuss what ages, discuss what grades, and discuss the independence of each child in their ability to handle working together with other children in this hub setting. And when we can do this. And so sometimes we're limited because with synchronous and asynchronous learning, live and recorded sessions from our teachers, many people need to get on at a certain time every day. And so as a Learning Hub parent, you may say, okay, well, all of our children have to be on at this time. But that may not be the case for some students. Some students may be able to look at their lessons in a recorded fashion and can get on at different points in the day. When that happens, then the Learning Hub has a lot of choices about when they can service their children. That might be on a weekend, that might be in an evening, or that might be during the day. That's up for you and the parents to decide, but needs to be a consideration. So your philosophy, your curriculum, who will you join with, what are the age, grades, and independency of the children involved, and then when do you plan to actually do this? All considerations before even thinking about starting a Learning Hub. Next topic for consideration is the budget and the law. And when we talk about the budget and the law, we're talking about school supplies, we're talking about food, and we're talking about any restrictions that may come into place. When we talk about specifically the budget, I want to talk about supplies. Because one of the things that people think is, okay, I'll get together with a group of my friends, or I'll get together with a cousin and we'll take a couple of her children and my children will be a hub. And that seems pretty easy enough, but you got to think about, are we going to provide breakfast, lunch? Are we going to provide snacks? When you're with kids, are we going to provide water bottles? Are we going to let them get Kool-Aid? Are we going to let them drink milk? Do they have supplies? Do they have whiteboards or crayons? Does everybody get to share from the same pot? Or are we bringing our own materials? When there's a special lesson or a science lesson, who's responsible for paying for and buying the supplies so that all the children get benefit of that? And as parents, we know what that's like when you partner up with somebody, and it doesn't even have to be in a virtual learning hub. You've told the child, come on, we'll take the child with you, and you and a family go somewhere, and next thing you know, you're coming out of pocket, and you look up and you think, oh my Lord, I've spent $100 on this other child, and I didn't even think that we were going to do that. So it's important that you have those type of budget considerations up front, those kind of budget conversations up front, so that everybody knows what the expectation is to running a successful hub. A hub can be run out of one person's home for the entire schedule, or maybe you swap homes. Maybe today and on tomorrow, we're at my home with the kids, and the next 2 days we're at your home. So we want to talk about what happens at my home financially, what happens at your home financially, how do we divvy that up? Are we looking at receipts once they come back? Do we have a pot that we put money into so that when incidentals and miscellaneous expenses come up, that we can make sure that they're taken care of? All of those things are considerations whenever you are starting a virtual hub. And then we also want to think about the type of learners that we have and the use of manipulatives. We want to talk about math manipulatives, things that kids can use to help them understand concepts in math. So much conversation about new math and whether or not our parents are ready for that and whether or not they can do it. But I promise you, manipulatives help children, are research-based, and so those cost. So that's a consideration you need to make. And finally, when we talk about hubs, we need to talk about whether or not they're daycares or whether you are truly trying to enhance the educational experience of your child. If in fact that is the goal, then I ask you to consider whether or not you need to consider the child care regulations for your state. In this time of COVID, so many things have been restricted and limited in what or the restrictions have been loosened actually in what families can be able to do. But you always want to make sure you follow your state guidelines in accordance. The last thing you want is a knock on your door asking if you are in fact operating a child care facility illegally, or if you have permission to do so granted by the state. And sometimes that's as simple as a phone call that you need to make for yourself to the child or the inspector general in your state. The inspector general of your state should be able to answer that question for you about the specifications for your virtual learning hub in your home. A lot of considerations, but absolutely doable. There's nothing I just said that could not be discussed and acted on within a good cup of coffee or over dinner with some good friends who have children and who care about their education. I encourage you during this season, don't try to do it alone. Look for support. It's out there, and people working together is the best way to educate the kids in our community. All right, so when we come back from this last break, we will go right into our teachable moments as we're learning today about virtual learning hubs in your home. Stay tuned, don't go away. All right, everybody, welcome back. Today we're talking about virtual learning hubs in the home and how you can start one. This part of the show we call Teachable Moments, where we just look at a couple of things that are happening around the country in regards to education. And one of the top things that has been discussed in recent weeks that's going on everywhere is the use of digital learning tools or virtual learning and its effect on children in terms of their attention. And so one of the things that I've ran into in the past couple of weeks in conversations with parents is that it looks like this. So the child's doing virtual learning, and then the next thing you know, the parent kind of walks away or looks away, and there's a tab change. And that tab change usually becomes TikTok or Snapchat or Twitter or any number of sites. And so as a former principal, we want you to remember, always keep your eye on the prize. And your prize is that child. I promise you, your child is doing what all children do and probably what you did too. When you walk away, they will play. So make sure you keep an eye on your child at all time and what they're doing when they're on the computer. Try to limit that time. They should not be obsessed with the computer and all that comes with it, which is harder now than ever because we're limited to going outside and doing some of the things that we want to do. but we still want to make sure that our kids stay focused on their education and they stay focused on what needs to happen. TikTok and Snapchat are not what they should be doing on the computer when they should be in virtual learning. With that, I'm Michelle Pennix, your host. It has been an incredible show. Again, I thank you. It's a wrap for today. You've been the best. This conversation continues next week as we dig deeper into education topics. We'll be here at the same place, the same time. And as always, to God be the glory.